There's a few things that you can think about in your business to give you formality, structure, operational power, deal with expansion and contraction of revenue and works and cash flow, capacity planning, but also make sure that you're being as cost effective as you can. So the first process, once you've done that, is processes. Another couple of days at uni for me. I always like to share these while they're hot off the press, fresh in my mind, try and help our listeners build better processes in their business. And this one is not one to be missed. So this is actually an operations chart that hopefully helps some of our listeners. So when we first set up XP Surveys, which is obviously our measured building and topographical surveying business, I actually built a complete flowchart from how we acquire a customer all the way through their lead generation to the point of sale, all the way then through to how the operations of the team deliver the work. So that's going to site, requesting what they need from the site, going to site, measuring it, then obviously getting back into the office and plotting together the work that we produce from an output perspective, and then all the way through to invoicing, sending the drawings to the client. Then the client goes back round to lead generation as a customer existing database. I did all of that just normally because I want to see it, I want to visualize it, and that's a really, really good process for you to do. But what we hadn't done in our business is actually done this for our development company. So I've now taken it upon myself to pull this process chart together. The issue you have with the development company is in every section of the business, there's so much that goes on. So you are going to have to do a simplified one and then sort of narrow down into the acquisition, the funding, the structure, design, the delivery, and then the sales or exit, and elaborate on those processes. But the top tips that I wanted to give you guys, because I'm hoping that you could actually sit down with a pen and paper, or maybe even a flowchart or Mira, which a lot of people use to build that process, is some tips how to make use of that process. So let's assume you've got a process. So you've gone through this acquisition, finance, structure, design, delivery, and sales in the business. Everyone's knowing what's happening, but there's a few things that you can think about in your business to give you formality, structure, operational power, deal with expansion and contraction of revenue and works and cash flow, capacity planning, but also make sure that you're being as cost effective as you can. So the first process, once you've done that, is in-house and outsource. So this is a huge one in our surveying company and a huge one in our development company, because you don't want 50 employees if your business expand and contracts. An example of this is if you ran a ice cream company and you lived in England and your sales are really strong in the summer but really weak in the winter. You don't want a full team of 10 people serving ice cream in the winter as you do in the summer. Exactly the same for our development company. So if we take on a multitude of projects and it's completely out of our resource, the first thing you need to think about is, do we hire in-house or do we outsource this particular work? And that's a really key thing to be thinking about in your process mapping, because you've then got every task within that project already down on paper, and you can analyze whether it should be in-house and outsourced. We do this in XP Surveys. We have a core team that are in-house, and we then have an external team that have obviously outsourced, so we can expand and contract with the busy period. So you kind of always want to be operating at 100% of in-house capabilities, and then when you have more work and those ratios go up, i.e. 120%, you then get an outsourced character that then picks up that sort of overstretched weight. If you know you're going to grow up to the point where a new hire in-house would always be sustained up to 100%, you can make a forecast to hire that person in. So it's all about future planning of resource, and that's really, really important for capacity planning. Why is that also important? For overheads. You also need to understand that having those 10 ice cream makers over winter is a huge overhead, and you might not want that in your business carrying out the seasons. So definitely analyze when you expand and contract, when you have in-house and outsourced efficiencies. But then I would also recommend, if you are feeling like you are going to be at capacity, put those systems in place to have an outsourced resource, qualify them, test them, make sure they're good enough to do what you need to do. And then you can, of course, use them ad hoc or even not use them. And the phrase I like to sort of use is, you can turn that tap on or off as you choose. Your staff, the taps are always on. So you've got to make sure there's buckets underneath those taps, utilizing that capacity. But the additional outsource help is a tap that you can turn off, so you don't need to use it all the time. Now, the second to last most useful thing about this, which I love, is you can then also look at the value add or non-value add tasks. Now, that can kind of be contextualized however you want. So for an example, in planning is an area that we add significant value. So if we outsource that, we might not hit the valuation areas that we need to hit to warrant us doing that that project or scheme. So you can actually circle those areas where they're value add or non-value add. For an example, if one of the areas is sales progression, where the price has been agreed to sell an apartment, the contract needs to be outdated, signed, and completion in place. Sales progression might not be a value add task because it's an administration task. So what you could then analyze is actually that might be something that's better outsourced because it's not skill that we're utilizing and is creating value within our chain. So you might then opt to outsource that particular task. That's what we mean by value add and non-value add. Hugely beneficial exercise. You can get your team to do it on a big sort of whiteboard with post-it notes, and I'd highly recommend you do cradle to grave everything in the business and look at areas that you might want or can outsource. We got process name at the top. Another thing that we are encouraged to do on the course is to split them into swim lanes, which I was quite creative. And it's basically where you split these tasks delivered within the project, and the task is split then by which department. So our departments in our business are acquisitions, funding, structure, design, delivery, and sales. So then you clearly know, everyone in the team, what task falls under what team at what time in the process. So you can all visualize what areas you're responsible for. So these are things that might be on job descriptions. You might not look at those job descriptions daily, but if it's on the process chart of the business, it's constantly reminding your team to be more proactive and more intuitive to make sure that you can secure the work that needs to be done, do it efficiently, and then also manage whether you're doing in-house or outsourced too.